He leaned forward. "Dad, please try to understand. I thought I was going to lose you. Everything felt fragile, impermanent. I needed something solid to hold on to." I turned away. And this woman, Sophia, she was okay with marrying a man whose father was dying? With no family present? Daniel sighed. It was just us, a justice of the peace and Robert as witness. It wasn't some elaborate celebration, Dad. It was two people clinging to each other during the worst moment of their lives. The worst moment of their lives. Not mine, lying helpless with machines breathing for me. Theirs. The selfishness of it struck me anew. "I want to meet her," I said finally. Daniel's relief was palpable. "She's been wanting to meet you too. She's been helping me research your condition, talking to cardiac specialists." I held up a hand to stop him. "Tomorrow. Bring her tomorrow. I need to rest now." It was a dismissal, and Daniel knew it. He stood reluctantly. "Dad, I know this isn't how either of us wanted things to happen. But Sophia is incredible. You'll see." I closed my eyes, not responding. After a moment, I heard the door close behind him. That night, alone in my hospital room, I dreamed of Carol. She sat at the foot of my bed, looking just as she had before the cancer took hold. Vibrant, her dark hair falling in waves around her face. "You're being too hard on him, James," she said. "Even in dreams, she was my conscience. He was terrified of losing you. He shut me out," I told her. "He hid this relationship, then married while I couldn't object." Dream Carol smiled sadly. "Is that what bothers you? That you couldn't object? Or that you weren't included?" Before I could answer, she faded, and I woke to the dim light of dawn filtering through the hospital blinds. The question haunted me throughout the morning. By the time Daniel arrived with Sophia, I had worked myself into a state of righteous indignation. They entered together, Daniel's arm protectively around a petite woman with auburn hair and cautious eyes. She carried a small potted plant, peace lily, Carol's favorite. The coincidence unsettled me. "Dad, this is Sophia, my wife." The pride in Daniel's voice when he said those words only fueled my resentment. Sophia stepped forward, placing the plant on the bedside table. "It's an honor to finally meet you, Mr. Mitchell. Daniel talks about you constantly." Her voice was soft, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "Does he?" I replied coldly. "Funny. He's never mentioned you." Daniel's jaw tightened, but Sophia simply nodded. "I understand your shock and disappointment. I would feel the same in your position." Her directness caught me off guard. "We should have found a way to tell you about us earlier." "Yes, you should have." I looked directly at Daniel. 6 months you've been dating, and not once did you think to mention it?" Daniel's face flushed. "I tried, Dad. Remember that dinner in February? I started to tell you I was seeing someone, and you launched into a lecture about how I needed to focus on my career, not get distracted." I vaguely recalled the conversation, though not in the same light. That wasn't a lecture. That was fatherly advice. Sophia stepped in smoothly. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm a neurosurgeon. I understand how precious time becomes during critical health events. When Daniel and I decided to marry quickly, it wasn't out of disrespect to you. It was because life suddenly seemed very fragile. A neurosurgeon. Not what I'd expected, though I wasn't sure what I had expected. Some flighty, impulsive woman who'd manipulated my vulnerable son? Sophia didn't fit that image. But I wasn't ready to let go of my anger. So fragile that you couldn't wait a few weeks? Until I was conscious?" Daniel started to speak, but Sophia touched his arm gently. "Your son sat by your bed for 7 days straight, leaving only when the nurses forced him to shower. He held your hand and talked to you for hours, even when you couldn't hear. When the doctors prepared us for the worst, it broke something in him." Her eyes held mine, unflinching. "I suggested waiting, Mr. Mitchell. Daniel was the one who couldn't bear the thought of marrying after losing you. He needed, to become a husband while his father was still alive, even if unconscious. It may not make sense to you, but it was an act of love, not defiance." The sincerity in her voice made it difficult to maintain my indignation. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw the toll the past weeks had taken. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he'd lost weight. His clothes now hung loosely on his frame. Whatever his reasons, whatever mistakes he'd made, he'd suffered too. "I would have liked to have been there," I said finally, the edge gone from my voice. Daniel's eyes glistened. "I know, Dad. We'll have a proper celebration when you're better. You can give a speech, embarrass me with childhood stories, the whole thing." Sophia smiled, and for the first time, I noticed how her presence seemed to steady Daniel. His shoulders relaxed when she was near, the worried crease between his brows softening. Perhaps this hasty marriage wasn't as impulsive as I'd assumed. "Tell me how you two met," I said, not because I was ready to accept the situation, but because I needed to understand it. They exchanged a glance, a private communication passing between them. "I was consulting on one of Daniel's sustainable housing projects," Sophia explained. "They wanted to incorporate design elements beneficial for patients with neurological conditions. We argued during our first 3 meetings." Daniel laughed, the sound startling me. When was the last time I'd heard my son laugh? She thought my designs prioritized aesthetics over function. I thought she was being needlessly clinical. Sophia nudged him playfully. I was right. Daniel nodded, conceding. She usually is. Despite myself, I felt a twinge of something other than anger. Curiosity, perhaps. And when did arguing turn to dating? Sophia blushed slightly. After I admitted his revised designs were brilliant, Daniel asked me to coffee to continue the discussion. That coffee lasted 4 hours. As they talked, taking turns filling in the story of their relationship, I found my resentment slowly giving way to resignation. This had happened, with or without my blessing. My son had found someone who challenged and supported him, who had stood by him through my health crisis. I wish you had told me, I said when they finished. I deserve to know. Daniel nodded, regret plain on his face. You're right. I was afraid of disappointing you, of you thinking I was being impulsive. After Mom died, you were so adamant about not rushing into relationships. The mention of Carol sobered the room. Your mother would have wanted to know the woman her son loved, I said quietly. Sophia reached for Daniel's hand. I wish I could have met her. Daniel says I remind him of her sometimes. Stubborn in all the right ways. Something in those words, the recognition of Carol's spirit, the acknowledgement of her continued presence in Daniel's life, cracked the last of my resistance. I was still hurt, still bewildered by the secret wedding, but I could no longer sustain the belief that Daniel had acted out of selfish impulse. The doctors say I might be discharged next week, I said, changing the subject. They tell me I'll need considerable care during recovery. Daniel nodded eagerly. We've set up the ground floor study as a bedroom for you. Sophia's already consulted with a cardiac rehabilitation specialist. You're planning to stay with me? I asked, surprised despite Robert's earlier revelation. Sophia answered, for as long as you need us. I've arranged a modified schedule at the hospital, and Daniel can work remotely most days. Their lives on hold, again, this time for my recovery. The sacrifice wasn't lost on me. You two should be enjoying your honeymoon, not playing nurse to an old man. Daniel shook his head firmly. We're family, Dad. We take care of each other. Family. The word hung in the air. This woman was my family now, through a ceremony I hadn't witnessed, a union I hadn't blessed. Yet here she was, rearranging her life to care for me, bringing peace lilies and steady compassion to my hospital room. Perhaps my son had chosen better than I gave him credit for. As they prepared to leave, promising to return tomorrow, I found myself watching how they moved together, anticipating each other's needs, communicating with glances. There was an ease between them that spoke of deeper connection than mere infatuation. Had I been too quick to dismiss their marriage as impulsive? That night, alone with my thoughts, I confronted an uncomfortable truth. My objection wasn't really about the timing. It was about feeling replaced, sidelined. For years after Carol died, it had been just Daniel and me. Now there was someone else in his life, someone who took precedence. The secret wedding while I lay unconscious felt like a metaphor for my greatest fear, becoming irrelevant to my son. The realization didn't erase the hurt, but it helped me understand it. Daniel hadn't married to hurt me, but to hold on to something precious while his world crumbled around him. Could I really blame him for seeking stability when mine had been so brutally interrupted? The days following Sophia's introduction passed in a blur of medical tests and tentative conversations. Each morning she arrived before Daniel, bringing fresh flowers and medical journals with highlighted passages about new cardiac treatments. Her knowledge was intimidating. She spoke to my doctors with the easy confidence of a colleague, asking questions I wouldn't have known to ask. I found myself studying her when she thought I wasn't looking. She was younger than Daniel by a few years, her movements precise and deliberate. She rarely spoke about herself unless directly asked, instead focusing conversations on my recovery or Daniel's projects. This selflessness should have endeared her to me, but it only heightened my suspicion. What was she hiding beneath this perfect facade? One afternoon, while Daniel stepped out to take a work call, I decided to probe deeper. "Why neurosurgery?" I asked abruptly. Sophia looked up from the book she'd been reading, surprise flickering across her face at my sudden interest. "My brother had a brain tumor when we were children," she answered after a moment. "The surgeon who saved him became my hero." "And did he survive, your brother?" The question was blunt, perhaps cruel, but I needed to see beyond her polished exterior. Sophia's composure faltered for the first time since I'd met her. "Yes, though not without lasting effects. Mikhail lives with our parents in Ukraine. The cognitive impairments mean he needs daily care." Ukraine. That explained the slight accent I couldn't place. "You're a long way from home," I observed. She nodded, a shadow crossing her features. "The fellowship at Mass General was an opportunity I couldn't refuse. Though leaving Mikhail was," she hesitated, "the hardest thing I've ever done." The raw emotion in her voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the calculated response of someone with ulterior motives. "Does Daniel know about your brother?" Sophia's expression softened. "Mikhail was the first thing I told Daniel about myself. On our first date." The revelation struck me with unexpected force. Daniel, who had watched his mother deteriorate from cancer, who had helped me care for Carol in her final months, would understand the weight of loving someone with medical challenges. Of course, he had been drawn to Sophia's story, to her dedication to her brother. "Daniel says you blame yourself for your wife's death," Sophia said quietly, turning the tables on my interrogation. I stiffened. "I don't see how that's relevant." She met my gaze steadily. "Isn't it? You lost Carol to cancer, despite doing everything possible to save her. I couldn't prevent the damage to my brother's brain, despite dedicating my life to neurosurgery. And now Daniel nearly lost you, despite being the most attentive son imaginable." Her insight pierced me like a scalpel, precise and painful. "We're all carrying guilt for things beyond our control," she continued. "Perhaps that's what drew us together, Daniel and me. We understand each other's fears." Before I could formulate a response, Daniel returned, his face brightening at the sight of us engaged in conversation. "Everything okay?" he asked, glancing between us uncertainly. Sophia smiled. "Just getting to know each other better." The moment of vulnerability had passed, her professional demeanor restored. That evening after they'd left, I found myself mulling over her words. The parallel she'd drawn between our losses was uncomfortably accurate. I had blamed myself for missing Carol's early symptoms, for not insisting on more aggressive treatment sooner. Was that same guilt driving my resistance to Daniel's marriage? Fear that I'd failed to protect him from another potential loss? The following day brought a surprise visitor, Robert again, this time with a small leather album tucked under his arm. "Thought you might want to see these," he said, placing it on my lap. I opened the cover to find photographs of Daniel and Sophia's wedding, a simple ceremony in what looked like a hospital chapel. Daniel in a dark suit, Sophia in a modest white dress, their hands clasped tightly as they exchanged vows. "It was nothing fancy," Robert explained, watching my face carefully. "Just the essentials. They even used your mother's ring. the one you gave Daniel after Carol passed. My fingers traced the image of the familiar gold band on Sophia's finger, Carol's mother's ring, a family heirloom I'd entrusted to Daniel for his future wife. They were gonna wait, you know, Robert continued. Had planned a small ceremony for next spring. But when your heart gave out, when the doctor said you might never regain consciousness. He shook his head. I've never seen Daniel so broken. Sophia was his rock through all of it. The photographs told a story different from the one I'd constructed in my mind. There was no celebration, no joy beyond the solemn relief of souls clinging to each other in a storm. In one image, Daniel's eyes were red-rimmed, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. In another, Sophia wiped a tear from his cheek. These weren't the pictures of an impulsive, selfish decision, but of a desperate grasp for stability in chaos. He called me at 2 in the morning. Robert said, his voice gentle. Said he couldn't bear the thought of losing both his parents before he had the chance to start his own family. Said he needed something to hope for, to live for if you didn't make it. He paused. I know you're hurt, James. But try to see it through his eyes. I closed the album, unable to look at the images any longer. I'm trying, Robert. It's just, I should have been there. My friend squeezed my shoulder. You were there, in every way that matters. That boy is who he is because of you and Carol. The man who stood at that altar, making those vows. That's your legacy. After Robert left, I lay awake thinking about legacy. What had I really taught Daniel? To hide his true feelings? To make life-altering decisions in secret? Or had I taught him to seize moments of joy when they presented themselves, to build connections that sustained him through grief? Perhaps both. The day of my discharge arrived with unexpected anxiety. The hospital had become a neutral territory, a buffer between my old life and this new reality, where my son was married to a woman I barely knew, where my independence was compromised by my damaged heart. As a nurse reviewed my medications and restrictions, I found myself longing to delay the inevitable. Daniel and Sophia arrived mid-morning, both looking uncharacteristically nervous. The house is all ready, Daniel assured me too brightly. We've set up the study just like we discussed, Sophia added, and I've coordinated with your cardiac rehab team. They'll come to the house 3 times a week. Their careful planning only highlighted how dramatically my life had changed. As we drove through familiar neighborhoods, the world outside seemed simultaneously unchanged and utterly different. The same trees lined the same streets, but now I viewed them through the lens of my mortality. Would I live to see them turn color in the fall? Would I be here next spring? Pulling into my driveway felt surreal. The house looked exactly as I'd left it the day of my heart attack. Lawn neatly trimmed, garden tools still leaning against the shed where I'd dropped them. Only a single detail betrayed the passage of time. New pots of bright flowers flanking the front steps, undoubtedly Sophia's touch. Inside, the changes were more evident. The study had been transformed with a hospital bed, monitoring equipment, and a television I didn't recognize. The kitchen counters held an array of pill organizers and nutrition supplements. Most jarring were the small feminine touches scattered throughout. A soft throw blanket here, a vase of fresh flowers there, evidence of Sophia's presence in my space. We tried to keep everything as familiar as possible, Daniel explained, watching my reaction anxiously, but the doctors insisted on certain modifications. He guided me through the new layout, bathroom rails, emergency call buttons, the rearranged furniture to accommodate a wheelchair if necessary. The tour ended in the kitchen, where a schedule had been posted on the refrigerator door. Your medication times, Sophia explained, and your rehab appointments. We've color-coded everything to make it easier. The meticulous planning was both touching and suffocating. I had gone from independent widower to invalid, dependent on my son and his new wife. It's a lot to take in, I admitted, sinking into a kitchen chair. Daniel immediately poured me a glass of water. We don't have to do everything at once, Dad. Let's just focus on getting you settled today. Sophia nodded agreement. Small steps are still progress. The phrase caught my attention. Is that what you tell your patients? Sophia smiled. It's what my mother used to tell Mikhail when he was relearning how to walk. She'd say, "Each step may be small, but they still carry you forward." The simple wisdom of it resonated, despite my reluctance to connect with her. That first night at home was a study in awkwardness. Daniel and Sophia had moved into the master bedroom, my bedroom, where Carol and I had slept for 30 years. The rationale was sound. It was the only upstairs bedroom with an attached bath, but the symbolism wasn't lost on me. I was quite literally being replaced, my son and his wife now occupying the space that had been exclusively mine and Carol's. Dinner was a quiet affair, the three of us navigating this new dynamic. Sophia had prepared a heart-healthy meal that, while nutritionally appropriate, held none of the comfort or familiarity I craved. Daniel attempted conversation, filling silences with forced cheer, while Sophia watched me with the careful assessment of a medical professional rather than a daughter-in-law. After eating, I retreated to my new bedroom, ostensibly to rest but really to escape the strained atmosphere. Through the closed door, I heard their hushed voices in the kitchen. Daniel's frustration evident even if the words weren't clear, Sophia's softer tones apparently soothing him. They were discussing me, undoubtedly my cold demeanor, my reluctance to embrace this new arrangement. Exhaustion eventually overcame me, but my sleep was fitful. Strange dreams blended with half-waking moments of disorientation. Where was I? Why wasn't I in my own bed? Each time reality reasserted itself, the weight of my new circumstances pressed down anew. Morning brought the first taste of our new routine. Sophia knocked softly at 7, entering with a tray of medication and a light breakfast. "How did you sleep?" she asked, her clinical assessment belied by genuine concern in her eyes. I shrugged, unwilling to admit how poorly I'd rested. "Well enough." She checked my vitals with practiced efficiency, making notes in a journal she'd designated for my care. "Your blood pressure is a bit elevated," she remarked. "That's normal after discharge, but we should monitor it." The "we" grated on me, this collective ownership of my health, my body, my recovery. "I can monitor my own blood pressure," I said, more sharply than intended. Sophia paused, her expression carefully neutral. "Of course you can. I'm just here to help when you need it." Her measured response made me feel childish, petulant. This woman had put her career on partial hold to care for me, and I was treating her like an intruder. Daniel appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work. "Morning, Dad." "How are you feeling?" Before I could answer, he continued. "I need to go into the office for a few hours, but Sophia will be here. I've got my phone if you need anything." The casual way he delegated my care to his wife stung. "I don't need a babysitter," I muttered. Daniel's face fell. We're just worried about you, Dad." Sophia placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Your father's right. He doesn't need constant supervision. Go to work. We'll be fine." The easy way she diffused the tension, supporting both Daniel and me simultaneously, was irritatingly impressive. After Daniel left, the house fell into uneasy silence. Sophia retreated to the dining room table, where she had set up a temporary workspace with her laptop and medical journals. I settled in the living room with a book, acutely aware of her presence just one room away. We existed in parallel, two strangers bound by love for the same person. By mid-morning, restlessness drove me to attempt normalcy. I decided to make coffee, a simple task that had been part of my daily routine for decades. In the kitchen, I found everything subtly rearranged. Coffee mugs in a different cabinet, filters moved to a lower drawer, accommodations for my new limitations, no doubt, but disorienting nonetheless. As I struggled to reach the coffee stored on a now lower shelf, a wave of dizziness struck me. I gripped the counter, waiting for it to pass, but my weakened legs betrayed me. I slid to the floor, not quite falling, but certainly not in control. The noise brought Sophia running. "Mr. Mitchell!" She was at my side instantly, her hands checking for injuries. "I'm fine," I insisted, though the room was still spinning slightly. "Just got lightheaded." Her medical training took over, checking my pulse, examining my pupils, asking clipped questions about symptoms. "Let me help you to the sofa," she said, positioning herself to support my weight. Pride made me resist. I can manage. But when I attempted to stand independently, the kitchen tilted alarmingly. Without comment, Sophia slipped her arm around my waist. I had no choice but to lean on her slight frame as we made our way to the living room. Once settled, she brought me water and took my blood pressure again. "It's dropped significantly," she reported, frowning. "Have you taken your diuretic today?" I nodded, embarrassment giving way to concern. She consulted the medication list from the hospital. "The dosage might be too high for home management. I'll call your cardiologist." As she made the call, speaking in confident medical terminology, I was struck by a reluctant realization. I needed her. Not just anyone. Her specifically, with her medical knowledge and calm efficiency. Daniel couldn't have managed this alone, not while trying to maintain his career. My stubborn resistance to Sophia's presence was not just unfair, it was potentially dangerous to my recovery. When she returned, she carried a cup of coffee made exactly as I preferred it, with just a touch of cream. "The doctor is adjusting your medication," she informed me, "and he suggests eating something with salt to raise your blood pressure temporarily." She set the coffee on the table beside me. "I noticed you were trying to make this when I found you." The simple kindness, the observation of my habits caught me off guard. "Thank you," I said, the words feeling insufficient. Sophia sat on the edge of the coffee table, facing me directly. "Mr. Mitchell, I understand this is difficult. Having strangers in your home, helping with things you've always done independently. It's an adjustment no one wants to make." Her frankness was refreshing after days of walking on eggshells. "You're not exactly a stranger," I conceded. "But yes, it's challenging." She nodded, accepting this partial thaw. "I want you to know something. When Daniel and I decided to marry quickly, it wasn't just because of the possibility of losing you. It was because we both understood something fundamental about life. It doesn't wait for convenient timing." She leaned forward slightly. "My parents delayed their happiness for years, always saying after Mikhail gets better or when things settle down. But things never settled. There was always another surgery, another therapy, another setback. They lost years they could have spent building joy alongside the struggle." The parallel to my own life with Carol was unmistakable. How many times had we said after the promotion or when Daniel finishes school? How many dreams had we deferred until it was too late? "Daniel told me about the trip to Italy," Sophia continued, as if reading my thoughts. "The one you and Carol always planned to take after retirement." The mention of our unrealized dream sent a sharp pang through me. Italy, the country Carol had longed to see, where her grandparents had been born. The trip we'd planned for decades, saving carefully, researching meticulously, always pushing it just a little further into the future, until cancer had erased all futures. "He blamed himself," Sophia said quietly. "When you had your heart attack, said he should have made you take that trip after Carol died, instead of letting you retreat into work and routine." The revelation stunned me. Daniel had never expressed such regret to me directly. "It wasn't his responsibility," I said finally. "It was my choice." Sophia nodded. "Just as marrying when we did was our choice. Not made to hurt you, but because we've both seen how quickly everything can change, how the future we count on isn't guaranteed." For the first time, I truly looked at this woman who had become my daughter-in-law. Behind the professional demeanor and careful composure was someone intimately acquainted with loss and regret, someone who had chosen to seize happiness when it presented itself, rather than defer it to some uncertain future. "I wish I'd known you before," I admitted. "Before the wedding." Sophia's smile was tinged with sadness. "So do I. But we're here now, and that's what matters." She rose, gently patting my hand. "Rest a bit. I'll bring you something salty to eat in a few minutes." As she walked away, I found myself reevaluating the narrative I'd constructed. I had cast Sophia as an opportunist who had taken advantage of my son during a vulnerable moment, but perhaps she was simply someone who understood, better than most, how precious time truly is, and how quickly it can slip away. The days gradually settled into a rhythm. Each morning, Sophia checked my vitals while Daniel prepared breakfast, heart-healthy oatmeal with berries, whole grain toast, occasionally an egg white omelet. They moved around each other with the easy synchronicity of people who truly knew one another, anticipating needs before they were voiced. It was both comforting and isolating to witness their connection, to be simultaneously cared for and reminded of my outsider status. My first cardiac rehabilitation session brought humility in sharp relief. The exercises that once would have seemed laughably simple, lifting 1-pound weights, walking slowly on a treadmill, left me winded and weak. The therapist, a kind-faced woman named Elena, assured me this was normal. "Your heart is learning to work differently now," she explained. "It needs time to adapt to its new limitations." Limitations. The word haunted me. I had always been strong, capable, the person others leaned on. Now I struggled with tasks a child could manage. After Elena left, I sat in the makeshift gym they'd arranged in the corner of the living room, staring at the weights that had defeated me. Shame burned hotter than exertion. Sophia found me there, still seated, still staring. Without comment, she picked up the weights and demonstrated the exercises again, her movements slow and deliberate. "Medical school taught me anatomy," she said conversationally, "but working with patients taught me patience. The body heals at its own pace, not ours." I watched her complete the set, her slender arms executing the movements with perfect form. "I used to be able to bench press 200 pounds, I said, the admission of weakness bitter on my tongue. Sophia set down the weights. "And you will be strong again. Different, perhaps, but strong." She sat beside me, her gaze direct. "In Ukraine, we have a saying. The oak that bends in the storm stands longer than the one that refuses. Your heart attack wasn't a failure, Mr. Mitchell. It was your body bending, not breaking." The perspective shift was unexpected, a reframing that allowed room for both acknowledgement of my current weakness and hope for recovery. That evening at dinner, Daniel shared news that his sustainable housing project had received additional funding. "They want to expand the neurological accommodations," he explained, excitement brightening his features. "The pilot units were so well received that they're doubling the number." He smiled at Sophia. "All thanks to your input." The genuine pride in his voice when speaking of his wife's contributions struck me. This wasn't just a marriage of convenience or emotional reaction. They were intellectual partners, collaborators in work that mattered to both of them. I found myself curious despite my lingering reservations. "What exactly are neurological accommodations?" I asked, my first voluntary engagement in their shared world. Both looked startled at my interest, exchanging a quick glance before Daniel launched into an explanation. "Specialized lighting to prevent seizure triggers, sound dampening materials for sensory sensitivity, spatial arrangements to accommodate mobility aids, all integrated so seamlessly that residents without neurological conditions wouldn't notice the adaptations. It's about designing spaces that work for everyone," Sophia added, her passion evident. "Not segregating people with different needs, but creating environments where differences aren't disabilities." As they talked, finishing each other's sentences and building on shared ideas, I glimpsed what had drawn them together, a mutual commitment to improving lives through their respective expertise. The conversation continued past dinner, moving to the living room where Daniel pulled out blueprints, spreading them across the coffee table. For the first time since coming home, I felt included rather than managed. I found myself offering suggestions based on my own experience as a former construction foreman, pointing out practical considerations they hadn't addressed. "That's brilliant," Daniel said when I proposed a modification to their bathroom design. "We've been struggling with that transition area for weeks." The simple acknowledgement of my contribution, the respect in his voice, eased something that had been tightly wound inside me. I wasn't just a patient to be cared for. I still had value, knowledge to offer. As the evening wound down, I found myself reluctant to retreat to my makeshift bedroom. The connection we'd established, tenuous though it was, felt too precious to abandon. Sensing my hesitation, Sophia suggested watching a documentary on Italian architecture, a subject that bridged Daniel's professional interests and my long-held fascination with the country Carol had so wanted to visit. The three of us sat together, Daniel and Sophia on the sofa, me in my recliner, as the camera panned across the Duomo in Florence, the ancient streets of Rome, the canals of Venice. I found myself sharing memories of research Carol and I had done, places we'd planned to visit. Instead of the usual pain these recollections brought, I felt a bittersweet pleasure in giving voice to our abandoned dreams. "You should still go," Sophia said quietly when the program ended. "When you're stronger." Honor her by seeing it through her eyes. The suggestion wasn't dismissive or simplistic. It acknowledged both my loss and the possibility of carrying Carol's memory forward in meaningful ways. That night, for the first time since coming home from the hospital, I slept soundly. No confused waking, no resentful ruminations on my changed circumstances. Instead, I dreamed of Italian piazzas, Carol beside me, her hand warm in mine. When I woke, the grief remained, but alongside it glimmered something I hadn't felt in years. Anticipation, a reason to heal beyond mere survival. The next morning brought rain, heavy drops streaming down the windows, creating a cocoon of sound around the house. Daniel had left early for a site visit, leaving Sophia and me to navigate breakfast alone. As she prepared tea, her movements were more hesitant than usual, a certain tension in her shoulders. "Is everything all right?" I asked, surprising myself with the concern. She turned, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face before her professional composure returned. "Just some news from home. My brother had a seizure yesterday, his first in nearly a year." The admission clearly cost her, sharing this personal worry with someone who had been less than welcoming. "Is he okay?" Sophia nodded, pouring hot water into mugs with careful precision. "Yes, but it's a setback, and being so far away." She didn't finish the thought, didn't need to. The helplessness of distance was something I understood all too well. "Tell me about him," I said, an offering of interest in return for her weeks of patience with me. She hesitated, then set the tea on the table and pulled out her phone. The screen displayed a young man with Sophia's same auburn hair, his smile slightly lopsided, eyes bright with life, despite the challenges evident in his posture. "This is Mikhail. He's 26 now. The seizure happened when he was 8. Her voice softened as she swiped through photos. Mikhail with their parents, Mikhail playing chess, Mikhail holding a diploma. He teaches music to children when he's well enough. He can't read notes traditionally, but he has perfect pitch. He finds ways around his limitations." The pride in her voice, the love evident in every word, reminded me powerfully of how I spoke about Daniel. "That's why you became a surgeon? To help people like him?" Sophia nodded, tucking the phone away. "Initially, yes. I had this childish notion that I could somehow fix what happened to him, but medicine taught me something more valuable, that healing isn't always about curing." She looked at me directly. "Sometimes it's about helping people live fully within new parameters, finding strength in adaptation rather than seeing only what was lost." The parallels to my own recovery were unmistakable, her philosophy of medicine directly applicable to my situation. "You're good at that," I acknowledged. "Helping people adapt." A small smile touched her lips. "I've had practice. And not just professionally." She hesitated, then added, "Daniel told me about the fishing trip." The reference caught me off guard. The fishing trip, a tradition Carol and I had started when Daniel was just 7, our annual weekend at a cabin by the lake. After Carol died, I'd maintained the tradition religiously, until last year when work pressures had led me to cancel. Daniel had been understanding, but the disappointment in his voice had lingered. "What about it?" I asked, suddenly defensive. Sophia wrapped her hands around her mug, gathering warmth. "He wants to restart it. This fall, when you're stronger. The 3 of us." The suggestion was both touching and terrifying. The idea of sharing this sacred tradition with someone new, of acknowledging that our family had expanded. "I'm not much good with a fishing rod these days," I said, deflecting with self-deprecation. Sophia saw through it immediately. It was never about the fishing, though, was it? Her insight was disconcerting. How much had Daniel told her about our family traditions, about the deeper meanings beneath surface activities? "No," I admitted. "It was about time. Uninterrupted time together." She nodded, understanding. "That's what he wants to preserve, not just the activity, but the connection." She sipped her tea, then added softly, "He's afraid of losing you, Mr. Mitchell. Not just physically, but emotionally. He fears you've given up. The directness of her observation struck like a physical blow. Had I given up? After the heart attack, after waking to find my son married without my knowledge or blessing, had I retreated into resentment rather than fighting for recovery, for connection? I haven't given up, I said, but even to my own ears the protest sounded hollow. Sophia didn't challenge me directly. Instead, she asked, "What would Carol want for you right now? For both of you?" The question lingered in the air between us, demanding honest reflection. What would Carol want? Not this bitter half-existence, this grudging acceptance of care. She would want joy for her son, connection for her husband. Perhaps different truly didn't mean worse. The following week brought another milestone, my first venture outside the house since returning from the hospital. The destination was simple, a follow-up appointment with my cardiologist. Yet the prospect of facing the world beyond my four walls filled me with unexpected anxiety. "Everything okay?" Sophia asked as she helped me into my jacket, noticing my shallow breathing. I nodded, unwilling to admit my nervousness. She didn't press, but as we walked to the car, her pace matched mine exactly. Not hurrying me, not hovering, just present and attentive. The hospital corridors triggered memories of my time as a patient, the helplessness, the fear, the indignity. By the time we reached the cardiologist's office, my heart was racing uncomfortably. Sophia must have noticed, for she placed a steadying hand on my arm. "Remember what Elena taught you," she said quietly. "Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. I followed her guidance, the simple breathing exercise gradually calming my pulse. Dr. Levine greeted us warmly, his assessment thorough but optimistic. "You're making excellent progress, Mr. Mitchell. Your EKG shows significant improvement." He glanced at Sophia. "Your daughter-in-law's care regimen is clearly working." The casual acknowledgement of our relationship, doctor to doctor, professional peers discussing my care, highlighted how seamlessly Sophia had integrated into my medical team, not as an outsider, but as an essential participant in my recovery. She's been, I hesitated, searching for adequate words, invaluable. Sophia's surprise at the compliment was evident, a fleeting widening of her eyes before she composed herself. Dr. Levine nodded approvingly. "With continued progress like this, we can discuss reducing some medications at your next visit, perhaps even planning some modest travel by winter." Travel. The word hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. As we left the appointment, Sophia walked beside me in thoughtful silence. Finally, she said, "You're thinking about Italy, aren't you?" The perceptiveness no longer unsettled me. Instead, I found comfort in being known, in not having to explain every thought. "Yes," I admitted, though it seems far-fetched. Sophia shook her head. "Not at all. Dr. Levine is conservative in his assessments. If he's suggesting travel might be possible, it's achievable." She hesitated, then added, "Daniel could take you. He has vacation time accumulated." "Daniel would hate Italy," I said, remembering my son's impatience with museums, his preference for function over historical beauty. He appreciates architecture professionally, but tourist attractions? Not his idea of a vacation. Sophia laughed softly. "You're right about that. He'd be checking his watch within an hour at the Vatican." The shared understanding of Daniel's preferences created an unexpected bridge between us. "What about you?" I asked. "Would you appreciate Italy?" She nodded, her expression wistful. "Very much. Art, history, medicine. Italy was crucial to all three. And the food, of course." Of course, I agreed, remembering Carol's enthusiasm for authentic Italian cuisine. We had collected cookbooks, practiced recipes, dreaming of comparing our amateur efforts with the real thing. Carol wanted to eat pasta in a little trattoria in Rome, drink wine under the Tuscan sun. Sophia's smile was gentle. "That sounds perfect." As we reached the car, a sudden clarity struck me. "Would you both come? To Italy?" The question surprised me as much as her. "You and Daniel, would you come with me? When I'm stronger?" The idea of fulfilling Carol's dream alone had always seemed hollow. But with Daniel and Sophia, it felt right. A way to honor the past while embracing the present. Sophia's eyes shimmered with unexpected emotion. "We would be honored," she said softly. "Truly honored." In that moment, something fundamental shifted. The future I had resisted, one that included Sophia as family, suddenly seemed not just acceptable but desirable. A chance to build new memories alongside the cherished old ones, to keep Carol's dreams alive through different hands. As we drove home, I found myself describing places Carol and I had planned to visit, the research we'd done, the little hotels we'd bookmarked. Sophia listened attentively, asking questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than polite attention. When I mentioned Carol's fascination with Renaissance art, Sophia shared her own knowledge of medical advances from that period, creating connections between our separate passions. By the time we arrived home, a tentative plan had taken shape, a trip for the three of us, perhaps in spring, combining Carol's itinerary with new elements that reflected our expanded family. Not a replacement for the journey I should have taken with my wife, but a different homage to her memory, a way of carrying her forward rather than leaving her behind. That evening at dinner, I shared Dr. Levine's positive assessment and our conversation about Italy. Daniel's reaction was everything I could have hoped for. Enthusiasm tempered with practical considerations, immediate engagement with the logistics of making it happen. We could start with Rome, he suggested, pulling out his tablet to research accessible accommodations. Work our way north as Dad's stamina increases, Sophia added. There are excellent cardiac facilities throughout Italy, just in case. Their collaborative planning, the way they incorporated my medical needs without making them the focus, demonstrated a sensitivity I hadn't fully appreciated before. As I watched them work together, my son and his wife, my family, I realized that the anger and resentment I'd harbored had been misplaced. Their hasty marriage hadn't been a rejection of me or disrespect for tradition, but an affirmation of life in the face of potential loss. They had chosen love and commitment when faced with the fragility of existence, a choice Carol would have not just understood but celebrated. The Italy we would visit wouldn't be the Italy Carol and I had planned. The memories we would create couldn't replace the ones we'd never had the chance to make. But perhaps that wasn't the point. Perhaps the true honor to Carol's memory wasn't clinging to abandoned plans, but embracing new possibilities with the same enthusiasm she had brought to life. Autumn arrived with a spectacular display of color. The maples in my front yard blazed crimson and gold, their falling leaves creating a tapestry on the lawn that reminded me of the abstract art Carol had always admired. My recovery had progressed steadily. I could now walk unassisted for nearly a mile, lift weights that would have seemed impossible months before, and manage most daily activities without help. The changes weren't just physical. The house had transformed too, no longer divided into territories of mine and theirs, but a shared space where we all belonged. The fishing trip Daniel had proposed became reality in early October. The cabin by the lake looked exactly as I remembered. Rustic wooden walls, stone fireplace, the persistent scent of pine and smoke, yet everything else had changed. Daniel insisted on driving, monitoring my comfort throughout the journey. Sophia packed specialized medication organizers and a portable blood pressure monitor alongside the fishing tackle. My role had shifted from protector to protected, an adjustment that continued to challenge my sense of identity. The first morning at the lake, I woke before dawn, a lifetime habit from construction work. The house was silent. Daniel and Sophia still asleep in the small bedroom across the hall. I dressed quietly and made my way to the kitchen, intending to prepare coffee as I always had on these trips. To my surprise, the pot was already full, still hot, a note propped against it in Sophia's neat handwriting. "Gone for a walk. Back soon. Help yourself." I took my coffee to the dock, settling into one of the weathered Adirondack chairs that had witnessed so many conversations between Daniel and me over the years. The lake spread before me, mist rising from its surface in ghostly tendrils, the water still as glass. In the growing light, I could make out a solitary figure at the shoreline, Sophia, standing motionless, observing something in the shallows. Curious, I made my way down the weathered steps to the shore, moving carefully on the dewy grass. As I approached, I saw what had captured her attention, a great blue heron fishing in the reeds, its movements precise and patient. We stood in silence, watching the bird's focused stillness, its sudden strike when a fish ventured too close. "He reminds me of you," Sophia said softly, not turning. "The way you watch everything, conserving energy until the exact moment to act." The observation surprised me, not just its accuracy, but that she had seen this aspect of my character that even Carol had sometimes missed, mistaking my reserve for aloofness. "I've always believed in waiting for the right moment," I admitted. "In construction, timing can be the difference between disaster and success." Sophia nodded, still watching the heron. "In surgery, too. There's a rhythm to the brain, a moment when tissue is most receptive to intervention. Rush it or delay, and everything changes." We stood in companionable silence as the sun climbed higher, burning away the mist. Finally, the heron, its breakfast complete, lifted off in a graceful arc of wings, disappearing beyond the tree line. Only then did Sophia turn to me. "Thank you for including me in this tradition. I know how much it means to both of you." Her gratitude was unnecessary but touching. "Your family now," I said, the words coming easier than I would have imagined possible months ago. "This is your tradition too." Something in her expression shifted, a subtle softening, a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to show. "When I left Ukraine," she said, "I thought I was just leaving a place. I didn't realize I was leaving all our family traditions behind too." She looked out across the lake. "My parents still gather mushrooms in the forest every fall, still make vareniki together on Christmas Eve. Those rhythms of life continue without me." The admission of homesickness was offered simply, without self-pity. Yet it struck me deeply. This accomplished woman, who had crossed oceans to pursue her calling, who had built a new life in a foreign country, still felt the absence of familial traditions. How much courage had it taken to marry into our small family, with its established patterns and private histories? "Tell me about the mushroom gathering," I said, a deliberate invitation to share her past. Sophia's face brightened. As we walked back to the cabin, she described autumn mornings in Ukrainian forests, the careful examination of each mushroom, the family jokes about her father's competitive nature when it came to finding the biggest boletes. By the time we reached the cabin, Daniel was awake, coffee in hand, watching us approach with a mixture of surprise and pleasure. "You two are up early," he observed. I nodded toward Sophia. "Your wife was teaching me about Ukrainian mushroom hunting traditions." The easy way I referred to her as your wife, without the mental reservation that had accompanied the term for months, wasn't lost on Daniel. His smile widened. "Did she tell you how her father once got lost for 3 hours because he refused to admit he'd wandered off the path?" Sophia laughed. "Daniel knows all my family stories now, even the embarrassing ones." The casual reference to their shared intimacy no longer stung. Instead, I felt gratitude that my son had found someone who trusted him with her past, who built bridges between their separate histories. After breakfast, we prepared for fishing, an activity that had always been more pretext than purpose on these trips, a backdrop for conversation rather than a serious pursuit. Daniel helped me into the small rowboat, his hands steady under my elbow. As we pushed off from shore, I realized this was the first time I'd been on the water since my heart attack, the first time I'd trusted my recovery enough to venture away from immediate medical assistance. Sophia sat in the middle of the boat, her posture revealing her unfamiliarity with this particular ritual. "I've never actually fished before," she confessed, examining the rod Daniel handed her with clinical interest. "In Ukraine, my father did the fishing. I just helped cook what he caught." "Then you're in for a treat," Daniel said, demonstrating the basic casting technique. "Dad's a patient teacher." The compliment, offered casually but sincerely, warmed me. Throughout my convalescence, patients had been directed toward me. Others accommodating my limitations, adjusting to my slower pace. To be reminded of my capacity to give rather than just receive shifted something fundamental in my self-perception. I guided Sophia through her first cast, correcting her grip gently. "Fishing isn't about strength," I explained. "It's about feel, sensing the movement beneath the surface, responding at just the right moment." She nodded, concentrating intently, her surgeon's hands quickly adapting to the unfamiliar movements. The morning passed peacefully, conversation flowing easily between topics: Daniel's work, Sophia's patience, memories of previous trips to this lake. When Sophia caught her first fish, a modest bass that fought impressively for its size, her excitement was infectious. "I did it!" she exclaimed, eyes bright with accomplishment. "What do I do now?" Daniel and I exchanged glances, years of shared experience passing between us. "Now comes the hard part," Daniel said, suppressing a smile. "Handling the fish." Quote, I watched as Sophia, who routinely performed delicate operations on human brains, approached the flapping base with cautious determination. Her tentative attempts to grasp it had us all laughing, the sound echoing across the water. "In surgery, my patients don't usually thrash quite so vigorously," she protested, finally managing to hold the fish still enough for Daniel to remove the hook. After a moment's consideration, she asked, "Can we release it? It seems too small to eat, and it fought so bravely." Daniel looked to me. This had always been my decision on our trips, whether to keep or release our catches. In the past, I'd often insisted on keeping whatever we caught, practical to the core. But something in Sophia's request resonated. "Of course," I agreed. "There's honor in letting a worthy opponent go free." She lowered the bass gently into the water, watching as it darted away into the depths. "Thank you," she said, and I knew she was thanking me for more than just the fish, for including her in our traditions, for allowing her to bring her own values to them, for the gradual acceptance that had replaced my initial resistance. That evening, as we sat on the cabin's porch watching the sunset paint the lake in fiery hues, Daniel brought out a bottle of wine he'd been saving. "I think it's time," he said, producing 3 glasses. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? With your father's medication?" I smiled at her concern. "Dr. Levine said 1 glass occasionally is fine now. My medication dosage was reduced last week." She returned the smile, acknowledging this milestone in my recovery. Daniel poured the wine, then raised his glass. "To family," he said simply. "All of us." The toast encompassed so much. Acknowledgement of our expanded circle, celebration of my recovery, recognition of the journey we'd taken together. "To family," Sophia and I echoed, glasses clinking gently in the gathering darkness. The wine tasted of promises kept and new beginnings, of traditions honored and reimagined. Later, as Daniel built a fire in the stone hearth, Sophia sat beside me on the small sofa, her voice low. "I wanted to ask you something, but I wasn't sure when the right time would be." The sudden seriousness in her tone caught my attention. "What is it?" She hesitated, then reached into her pocket and withdrew a small object. When she opened her palm, I saw Carol's wedding ring, the one Daniel had given her for their hasty ceremony. "I've been wearing this on a chain," she explained. "It felt wrong to have it on my finger when you hadn't given your blessing." The firelight caught the gold band. The small diamond Carol had insisted was more than enough, despite my offers to upgrade it over the years. "Daniel told me its history," Sophia continued. "How it belonged to your mother, then Carol. How you saved it for his future wife." She looked at me directly. I wanted to ask, properly, would you be comfortable with me wearing it now? As your daughter-in-law. The question struck me with unexpected force. This small circle of gold carried generations of commitment, of love that had weathered challenges and endured. Carol had worn it proudly for 32 years, through better and worse, in sickness and health. Now Sophia asked permission to continue its journey. "Carol would have liked you," I said finally. "Your determination, your compassion, the way you challenged Daniel to be his best self." I took the ring from her palm, held it up to the firelight. "She would be honored to have you wear this." Tears glimmered in Sophia's eyes as I placed the ring in her hand again. "You are my daughter now," I said, the words both acknowledgement and promise. Not by blood, but by choice. And sometimes, the family we choose is the strongest kind. Daniel, returning with more firewood, paused in the doorway, witnessing the exchange in silence. When Sophia held up the ring, showing him what had transpired, his expression was one of profound relief and gratitude. He set down the wood and crossed to us, embracing us both awkwardly but earnestly. "Thank you, Dad," he whispered. The simple phrase contained volumes. Thanks for acceptance, for blessing, for the gift of continuity across generations. In that moment, the cabin felt full of presence. Not just the three of us, but all who had loved and been loved within these walls. Carol's spirit seemed palpable, her approval a tangible warmth in the room. That night, I dreamed not of the past but of the future. Springtime in Florence, the three of us standing before Brunelleschi's dome, Carol's guidebook in my hands, her dreams fulfilled through different arrangements than we had planned. I woke feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of resentment and regret lifted from my chest. Winter came early that year, the first snowfall arriving before Thanksgiving. I opened my eyes to the harsh fluorescent lights of the ICU, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, a reminder that I was still alive. My body felt leaden, disconnected, as if I were trapped in a vessel that no longer obeyed my commands. The ventilator forced air into my lungs, an intrusion I couldn't fight. Through the fog of medication, I tried to piece together how I'd ended up here. The last thing I remembered was a searing pain in my chest while working in the garden, then nothing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. A nurse with kind eyes approached my bedside. "Welcome back, Mr. Mitchell. You've been unconscious for 12 days. 12 days. The words echoed in my mind like distant thunder. I wanted to ask questions, but the tube in my throat made speech impossible. She seemed to understand my confusion. "You had a massive heart attack followed by complications. Your son Daniel has been here every day. He'll be so relieved to see you awake." Daniel, my only child. Relief washed over me knowing he'd been nearby. The nurse placed a small whiteboard in my hands. With trembling fingers I wrote, "Daniel." She smiled. "He just stepped out to make some calls. He's been practically living in that chair." She nodded toward the worn recliner in the corner of the room, a jacket draped over its arm, unmistakably Daniel's. I drifted in and out of consciousness over the next few hours, fragments of conversations between doctors floating around me. Words like "remarkable recovery" and "still critical" created a contradictory narrative I couldn't fully grasp. When I finally opened my eyes again, Daniel was there, his face a mix of exhaustion and relief. At 32, he looked older than I remembered, worry lines etched around his eyes. "Dad," he whispered, taking my hand carefully, mindful of the IV. "You scared the hell out of us." I squeezed his fingers weakly, trying to convey everything I couldn't say. He looked thinner, his usually impeccable appearance rumpled. How long had he been wearing the same clothes? I gestured toward the whiteboard and he placed it in my hands. "How long here?" I scrawled. "Almost 2 weeks," Daniel replied, his voice rough with fatigue. "You were on life support for the first week. The doctors—" He paused, swallowing hard. "They weren't sure you'd make it." I wrote again. "Work? Your projects?" He waved dismissively. "Don't worry about that. Everything's on hold." Daniel was a brilliant architect, his career just beginning to soar. I knew how hard he'd worked for his recent commission, a sustainable housing development that could define his career. The thought of him setting it aside filled me with both gratitude and guilt. I started to write again, but he gently took the board away. "Rest, Dad. We'll talk later." His phone buzzed, and a flicker of something, anxiety, crossed his face. He checked the screen and quickly silenced it. "Just the office," he said, but something in his tone felt off. Before I could wonder more, fatigue pulled me back under. The next time I woke, a doctor was removing my breathing tube. The procedure was uncomfortable, leaving my throat raw and aching, but the relief of being free from the ventilator outweighed the pain. "You're recovering remarkably well, Mr. Mitchell," the doctor said, "but you're not out of the woods yet. Your heart sustained significant damage." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Can I talk now?" My voice was a raspy whisper, barely audible. The doctor nodded. "Briefly, don't strain yourself." I turned to Daniel, who hovered anxiously nearby. "Thank you for staying." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something troubled in his expression, a tension I couldn't decipher. Over the next few days, I grew stronger, graduating from ice chips to applesauce, from complete bed rest to sitting up. Daniel was a constant presence, yet increasingly distracted. He took calls in the hallway, speaking in hushed tones I couldn't make out. When I asked about his work, he deflected. "Everything's fine, Dad. Focus on getting better." One afternoon, while Daniel was absent, my longtime friend Robert visited. His familiar weathered face was a welcome sight. After the obligatory questions about my health, he settled into the chair beside my bed, uncharacteristically fidgety. "James, there's something you should know." His serious tone immediately put me on alert. "What is it?" My voice was stronger now, though still rough. Robert looked toward the door as if ensuring we were alone. "It's about Daniel." Quote, my heart rate increased, the monitor beside me betraying my anxiety. "Is he okay?" Robert sighed. "Yes, but he got married, James. 3 days ago." The words hit me like another heart attack. "Daniel. Married? While I lay unconscious?" "That's not possible," I whispered. "He's not even seeing anyone." Robert's expression was pained. "He's been dating a woman named Sophia for about 6 months. He didn't tell you because—" He hesitated. "Because you made it clear after Carol died that you didn't want him rushing into relationships." My late wife's name sent a familiar pang through me. Carol had been gone for 5 years, taken by cancer too young. After her death, I had warned Daniel about rebounding, about seeking comfort in the wrong places. Had my caution driven him to secrecy? 6 months isn't rushing? I asked, my voice rising despite my weakened state. Robert shook his head. "There's more. They were engaged for only 2 weeks before your heart attack. When you were put on life support, when the doctors said you might not make it." He trailed off, uncomfortable. "They moved up the wedding. Daniel said he wanted his father to still be alive when he got married, even if you couldn't attend." A cold numbness spread through me. My son had married a woman I'd never met, never even heard about, while I was possibly dying. A woman who would now be my daughter-in-law, a stranger in my family. Why didn't he wait? I asked, though it wasn't really Robert the First was questioning. "I'm awake now. I'm recovering." "James," Robert said gently, "the doctors gave you a 10% chance of survival. Daniel was preparing for the worst." He leaned forward, his eyes earnest. "He's been destroyed by this. Torn between staying at your bedside and moving forward with the life he's building. Don't judge him too harshly." I turned away, staring at the bland hospital wall. My son had hidden an entire relationship from me, then married in secret while I fought for my life. Was this who I'd raised him to be? "Where is he now?" I asked. Robert shifted uncomfortably. "He and Sophia are at your house, getting it ready for when you're discharged. They've moved in temporarily to help care for you." "Strangers in my home." "No, not strangers. My son and his wife." The thought felt surreal, disconnected from reality. "I want to be alone now, Robert." My friend nodded, squeezing my shoulder before leaving. As the door closed behind him, I let the tears come, silent and burning. When Daniel returned hours later, I pretended to be asleep. I watched through barely open eyes as he settled into the chair, pulled out his phone, and smiled at something on the screen. Was he texting her? His wife, this Sophia I knew nothing about. The betrayal cut deep, a pain different from but no less intense than the physical trauma my body had endured. The next morning, I confronted him. "When were you going to tell me you got married?" The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Dad, He stopped, gathering himself. "I wanted to wait until you were stronger." "Stronger?" I echoed, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. "Strong enough to learn my son married a complete stranger while I was dying?" Daniel flinched as if I'd struck him. "She's not a stranger to me, Dad. I love her. And the doctors said you might never wake up. So you couldn't wait?" The heart monitor beside me beeped faster. You couldn't give your father a chance to be at your wedding? Daniel's shoulders slumped. It wasn't like that. When they put you on life support, when they told us to prepare for the worst, I couldn't bear the thought of getting married after you were gone. I wanted to be your son on my wedding day, even if you couldn't be there. His logic struck me as twisted, self-serving. You wanted to be my son. My son would have waited. Daniel's eyes hardened, a flash of anger replacing his guilt. Like you waited for Grandpa's approval before marrying Mom? He was halfway around the world, but you didn't postpone the wedding. The comparison stung. My father had been deployed overseas when Carol and I married, a small civil ceremony we later repeated for his benefit. But this was different. I hadn't been hiding Carol from him. I hadn't been unconscious, unable to object. That wasn't the same, I insisted. No, it wasn't, Daniel agreed, his voice steady now. You weren't fighting for your life. But the principle is the same. Sometimes we have to move forward, even without everyone we love present. She would want us to build something meaningful from the broken pieces left after her death, not separately, but together. She'd want us to move forward, I said finally. Together. Sophia nodded, a simple acknowledgement of truth recognized. Then perhaps that's where we start. The we no longer grated as it once had. Somehow, in the quiet of this rainy morning sharing tea and difficult truths, Sophia had ceased to be an intruder and become, if not yet family, at least an ally in healing. Daniel returned mid-afternoon, soaked from the rain but bubbling with excitement about progress at the construction site. His enthusiasm faltered when he saw Sophia and me seated at the dining room table, a chessboard between us, deeply engaged in conversation. Dad used to be state champion, Sophia explained, moving her knight with careful deliberation. He's teaching me some strategies. Daniel's expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and finally cautious hope. You two are playing chess? The normalcy of the scene, his father and wife engaged in a simple game, seemed to disarm him completely. Your wife is a quick study, I said, capturing her bishop, though her defensive game needs work. Sophia laughed, the sound natural and unguarded. He's being generous. I've lost 3 games already. The easy banter between us, the relaxed atmosphere, visibly affected Daniel. He pulled up a chair, watching the game conclude with an expression of wonder, as if witnessing something miraculous. That evening, as I prepared for bed, Daniel knocked softly on my door. When I invited him in, he stood awkwardly at the threshold, hands in his pockets like a teenager rather than a married professional. You and Sophia seem to be getting along, he said, the statement half-question. We found some common ground, I acknowledged. Daniel nodded, shifting his weight. Dad, I've wanted to say this for weeks, but it never seemed the right time. He took a deep breath. I'm sorry. For the wedding, for not telling you about Sophia earlier. I handled it badly. The apology, so long awaited, now seemed almost unnecessary. Why didn't you tell me about her? I asked, the question genuine rather than accusatory. Daniel sat heavily on the edge of my bed. Honestly, I was afraid you'd talk me out of it. He laughed humorlessly. Not because of anything about Sophia, but because after Mom died, you were so adamant about not rushing into relationships. I was protecting you, I said quietly. Or thought I was. Daniel nodded. I know, but Dad, I wasn't 22 making an impulsive decision. I've dated enough to know when something is real. With Sophia, from the first argument over those hospital designs, I just knew. There was a certainty in his voice I couldn't dismiss, a maturity in his assessment that demanded respect. You could have given me the chance to see that, I pointed out, instead of shutting me out. Daniel's shoulders slumped. You're right, I was a coward. I told myself I was sparing you worry, but really I was avoiding conflict. The admission struck me, not because of its content, but because of the self-awareness it demonstrated. My son had grown into a man capable of recognizing and acknowledging his own failings. When had that happened? We both made mistakes, I conceded. I wasn't exactly receptive to changes in your life. Daniel looked up, hope cautious in his eyes. So where does that leave us? It was a good question, one that deserved honest consideration. Moving forward, I said, echoing the conclusion Sophia and I had reached earlier, Together, relief transformed his face. That's all I want, Dad. For us to be family, all of us. The inclusion of Sophia in that vision no longer triggered resistance. Instead, I found myself nodding. I'd like that too. The simple agreement seemed to lift years of tension from his shoulders. As Daniel rose to leave, I added, Sophia mentioned the fishing trip. His expression brightened further. She told you about that? I wasn't sure if... He trailed off, uncertainty returning. Would you want to? It wouldn't be the same, but... It shouldn't be the same, I interrupted gently. We're not the same, but different doesn't mean worse. The words were Sophia's philosophy reflected back, a perspective I was gradually adopting as my own. Daniel nodded, understanding the significance of my acceptance. I'll start planning then. For October, when you're stronger. After he left, I lay in bed contemplating the shifts that had occurred over a single day. From reluctant tolerance to cautious embrace of my new reality. Not just my physical condition, but the expanded family circle that now included Sophia. The thought no longer filled me with resentment, but with a tentative hope. Our Italian plans took concrete form, tickets purchased for May, accommodations researched with my medical needs in mind. Each step in the planning process became a kind of therapy, focusing my recovery toward a tangible goal rather than abstract improvement. The holidays approached with a new energy in the house. Sophia integrated Ukrainian traditions alongside our established rituals, teaching us to make simple vareniki in the kitchen, introducing the custom of the first star on Christmas Eve. Daniel embraced these additions enthusiastically, and I found myself appreciating how they enriched, rather than diluted, our family practices. On Christmas morning, I woke to find a small, carefully wrapped package on my bedside table. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages thick and inviting. A note from Daniel and Sophia explained, for recording memories in Italy, past dreams and new experiences side by side. The thoughtfulness of the gift, its acknowledgement of both honoring Carol's memory and creating fresh experiences, epitomized how far we had come. The new year arrived with another milestone. Drive Levine declared me ready to resume part-time consulting work. The return to professional engagement, to having value beyond my role as patient and father, restored a crucial piece of my identity. I began working remotely with Daniel's firm, providing insights from my decades in construction that complemented his innovative designs. One evening in late January, as snow fell steadily outside, Sophia approached me with an unexpected proposal. I've been thinking about our living arrangements, she began cautiously. Daniel and I have been discussing finding our own place in spring. My heart sank slightly at the prospect of their departure, though I'd always known it was inevitable. But, she continued, I had another idea I wanted to explore with you first. She unfolded architectural plans on the coffee table. Daniel's work, judging by the style. What would you think about modifying the house instead? Adding an extension with a separate entrance? Creating two connected living spaces? The drawings showed a thoughtful addition to my home, a self-contained apartment connected to the main house through a shared sunroom. Private spaces for each household, common areas for togetherness. This way, Sophia explained, you maintain your independence, we have our own space, but we remain connected, for holidays, for meals when we want, for whatever needs might arise. The proposal stunned me, not just its practicality, but the underlying commitment it represented. They weren't simply caring for me during recovery. They were envisioning a future where our lives remained intertwined, where family meant proximity and connection rather than occasional visits. You don't have to decide now, Sophia added, misinterpreting my silence. It's a big change to consider. I shook my head, emotion making speech momentarily difficult. It's not that, I managed finally. It's just I never expected this. To not be alone again. Understanding dawned in her eyes. James, she said, using my first name for the first time, you will never be alone again, not while we have any say in the matter. The simple promise, delivered without drama or excessive sentiment, carried absolute conviction. When Daniel came home that evening, I was already reviewing the plans with a contractor's eye, making notes about structural considerations and material choices. His face lit up at this tangible evidence of my support. So you're open to the idea? I nodded, pointing out where a supporting wall might be problematic, already invested in making this shared vision reality. By spring, As crocuses pushed through the last patches of snow in the garden, construction had begun on the addition. Each day brought visible progress: foundation laid, frames erected, windows installed. The physical transformation of the house paralleled my own continuing recovery, both of us being rebuilt stronger than before. In April, just weeks before our scheduled departure for Italy, Sophia received news that left her uncharacteristically shaken. Her brother, Mikhail, had experienced a series of severe seizures requiring hospitalization. Though stabilized, his condition had revealed complications that demanded specialized care. I found her in the garden, sitting motionless on the bench Carol had loved, her phone clutched in her hand. "My parents are overwhelmed," she said when I joined her. "They're aging, and Mikhail's care is becoming too much for them to manage alone." The conflict was evident in her face: dedication to her family here, responsibility to her family there. "You should go to them," I said simply. She looked up, surprise replacing worry. "But Italy, all our plans, your recovery journey." I shook my head, cutting off her protests. "Italy has stood for 2,000 years. It will wait a few more months for us." The relief in her expression was immediate and profound. "I don't want to leave you and Daniel," she admitted. "But Mikhail—" I covered her hand with mine, the gesture of reassurance now natural between us. "He's your brother. You don't have to choose between families. We'll all go." Her confusion was evident. "All go? To Ukraine?" I nodded, the decision crystallizing even as I spoke it aloud. "Daniel can work remotely for a while. My consulting can happen from anywhere. And perhaps your brother would benefit from a change of environment." The idea expanded as I considered it. "He could come back with us, stay in the new addition until proper arrangements can be made." Sophia stared at me, disbelief giving way to hope. "You would do that? Open your home to my brother?" The question revealed how completely our relationship had transformed, from reluctant tolerance to genuine family concern, from resentment of her presence to willingness to expand our circle further. "Of course," I said, the answer requiring no deliberation. "That's what family does." The simple truth of it resonated between us. This was what Carol had always understood, what she had tried to teach us both: that love expands to fill the space we create for it, that family is defined not by blood or circumstance, but by choice and commitment. When Daniel returned from work, we presented the revised plan together. His immediate agreement, his readiness to postpone Italy and travel instead to Ukraine, confirmed what I already knew. My son had found a partner who shared his values, who balanced his strengths and weaknesses as Carol had once balanced mine. 2 weeks later, we boarded a plane to Kyiv, not the journey we had planned, but one that felt right nonetheless. As the aircraft lifted through clouds into clear blue sky, I thought of the path that had brought us here, from near death to new life, from bitter resistance to grateful acceptance, from isolation to connection. My heart, damaged but healing, beat steadily in my chest. Beside me, Daniel and Sophia spoke quietly, their heads bent over a tablet displaying information about Ukrainian rehabilitation facilities. They had researched options not just for Mikhail, but for countless others with similar needs, their professional collaboration extending naturally into this personal mission. Looking at them, I felt a certainty that transcended my lingering regrets. Carol would have approved of this detour, this prioritizing of need over desire. The Italian dream wasn't abandoned, merely postponed for something more urgent: the care of family, the embracing of responsibilities that crossed continents and bloodlines. I had once believed that Daniel's marriage during my unconsciousness was a betrayal, that his choice reflected impulsivity rather than commitment. Now I understood it was exactly the opposite, a profound affirmation of life's continuity, a declaration that love persists even when death threatens to unravel everything. My son hadn't married to escape his commitment to me, but to honor it in a different form. In choosing Sophia, he had chosen not just a wife, but a fellow caregiver, not just a companion, but a healer. He had built a bridge between his mother's legacy of compassion and his own future of service and connection. As the coastline disappeared beneath us, giving way to the vast Atlantic, I opened the leather journal they had given me for Christmas. On its first blank page, I began to write, not about Italy and postponed dreams, but about Ukraine and expanded family. About a journey different from, but no less meaningful than the one I had originally envisioned. Carol's ring now circled Sophia's finger properly, with my full blessing. My heart now beat with purpose, beyond mere survival. My son now carried forward not just my name, but the values that had always defined our family. Adaptability, commitment, the courage to change course when love called us in unexpected directions. The future stretched before us, uncertain, as all futures are, but rich with possibility. Italy would wait for us, its ancient stones and Renaissance masterpieces preserved for whenever we could make our pilgrimage. For now, we flew toward different landmarks, a brother in need, parents growing older, a family expanding beyond borders and bloodlines. This was not the path I would have chosen when I opened my eyes in that ICU, learning my son had married while I lay between life and death. But looking back now, I could see how each reluctant step had brought me to this moment of clarity. This understanding that sometimes, life's greatest gifts arrive in packages we initially resist opening. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.